So my name is Ray Ann Wessel. I'm the Director of Natural Resource Policy for the Sanibel-Captiva Conservation Foundation. My background is as a limnologist and marine scientist, so we could have another discussion about taking a scientist and putting them in policy. Strange idea. So I want to talk to you about what's happening right now outside these windows and along our beaches and coastlines. And when we talk about water management in Florida and some of what we have, the decisions that are made that affect this water quality, we're basically talking about two entities. We have at the state level the South Florida Water Management District, and at the federal level the Corps of Engineers. They have a 50-50 partnership that manages the decisions for this greater Everglades system. So when we talk about the historic Caloosahatchee, I think it's important to understand that the Caloosahatchee was part of the west coast that came up to a series of lakes and marshes that existed here on the west side of Lake Okeechobee. This on the right-hand side would be Lake Okeechobee. This was the western Everglades. So if you can imagine the Everglades coming up and sort of the thumb wrapping around the western side of the lake. That was the western Everglades. And the connection to the Caloosahatchee was really when the lake got to its highest point. Then water would flow to the west through these series of 4 lakes and tumble over a waterfall at Lake Flirt, and then start its journey into the Caloosahatchee, which is the river system that today has been connected from that point all the way to the lake. And with the Caloosahatchee, we have a conundrum. We have a challenge because we have two very opposite problems. When it's wet, like it is now, we have very wet conditions, way too much water coming into the system, blowing the estuary out of our river and into the barrier islands, into the Gulf of Mexico, into the aquatic preserves. But on the flip side, when we've had droughts, we have too little water coming into the system. It gets diverted for other agricultural uses, and the problem is then that we have similar conditions, it's just that without the enough water. So here is a way of illustrating this is 2 different years. One, in 2005, you can see the barrier islands here on the left-hand side with the black plume of water, similar to what we have going on now, coming out into the, beyond the barrier islands into the Gulf of Mexico. On the right-hand side, we have the Franklin Lock, which is up in eastern Lee County. And there, that's the westernmost lock. All this dark water here is part of the tidally influenced Caloosahatchee. Everything above that is an algal bloom that occurs because they cut off the water that flushes into the system for the Caloosahatchee. When they do that, we have problems at both ends. So that's why we call it the conundrum. It's way too much, way too little, and we're trying to get to a point where we have a sustainable balance. So the colors really change on this, with this projector. So what we have is a really big system that starts up in Walt Disney, near Walt Disney, up in Orlando, and comes down through the Kissimmee River system into Lake Okeechobee. From Lake Okeechobee, it historically tumbled over the southern part of the lake basin and into the Everglades, down to 10,000 Islands and Florida Bay. But that system's been drastically altered because of flood control projects. So today, just to get us all on the same page, I wanted to talk about where water comes in and where it goes out. So how does this whole hydrologic system work? So the biggest input from into the Lake Okeechobee is the Kissimmee River Basin. Another very large basin that feeds into the lake is Fish Eating Creek. The historic flow went south, but now that there's a dike around the lake, it's all managed, and most of the water is discharged to the west. When we have these excess conditions, about 70% is coming to the west, and about 20% is going to the east, and it's damaging. It has the same effect. It has lethal impacts to both estuaries. One thing to note is that the way the system has been managed, created for flood control, the good news is the Army Corps of Engineers really knows how to drain and create flood control projects. It works great. Bad news is it works great. And when they created it, it wasn't designed to look at the estuaries and how the natural systems are affected on the coast. So water can come into this system 6 times faster than they can get rid of it, which is why they get very touchy when lake levels get to about where they are now. They're very concerned about being able to get rid of water if there would be a big storm and we get water 6 times faster building up in the lake than they can discharge it. So where is this water coming from? And I apologize, these colors changed a lot, so it may be a little harder to see. This blue here on the bottom is representing Lake Okeechobee water coming into the Caloosahatchee and into the estuary. The white portion, which looks white on here, is what's coming from our watershed and upstream of the lock, and then this yellow portion is what's coming from the tidal basin. The important thing to know here is that what will surprise most people is most of the time more water is coming into our watershed, into our river from our watershed than from Lake Okeechobee. So right now, we have about 24% of the inflow coming from Lake Okeechobee. The rest of it is coming from the watershed, the 800,000 acres north and south of the Caloosahatchee from Lake Okeechobee through Glades and Hendry County and Lee County. And just to give you, if you can see this, this is what we've been doing this year. This is the band that shows where we're going. We really want to stay between this operational band and this beneficial use band. We extended up above that, and that's when the Corps gets very nervous, because the higher the lake gets, the more tenuous the condition of the dike is. And if the dike were to break, there are communities right around the lake that would flood. And so that's why they have this large concern when we get a lot of water. But I think it's also important to know who makes the decisions. And for the most part, the Corps of Engineers makes the decision in this band when we are from very high water to water shortage. It's ultimately their decision. They own and manage the locks and the dam and all the culverts. But when we get into water shortage, that becomes just the purview of the Water Management District. So they defer to the Water Management District when we have droughts. So it's another way that we work with both agencies at different times. They have a not so complicated way of making these decisions. And every week we have a conversation, and depending on where we are on the level of the lake, and whether the forecast is wet or dry, it will tell them how much water they release, and that's an up to amount, up to 450, up to 6,000, up to something. So this is how they make the decision. The important thing to note here, and you will hear a lot of our politicians saying this, they'll say, we just need to store more, fix the dike so we can put more water in the lake. And that is absolutely not the solution here, because the lake is managed between 12.5 and 15.5, because that's where the marsh lives. The marsh in Lake Okeechobee is the heart and lungs of an aquatic system. So this lake system depends on a healthy marsh. If we raise water levels above 16 for any period of time, we're going to kill that marsh, and when we kill that marsh, we kill a little free water quality filter that we have here on the West Coast. They don't have it on the East Coast. We kill the habitat for the snail kites, an endangered species. We kill the habitat for all the fisheries that support all those fishing tournaments and bass tournaments on Lake Okeechobee. So it's really important to understand managing the lake is important, because if the lake deteriorates, guess where that water's coming? Here and to the East Coast. Oh wow, this color is really strange. All right, so when we talk about water quality, I think it's important to know where are the sources of poor water coming from. And there are 2 elements that we look at, nitrogen and phosphorus. And what will surprise most people is that we get about 38% of the nitrogen in our coastal estuary system is coming from Lake Okeechobee. But that means that 62% is coming from this 800,000 acre watershed that's on both sides of the river and extends from Lake Okeechobee out to the coast. Likewise, our watershed is responsible for about 90% of the phosphorus that comes in. So when we like to, or you will hear people say, those lake releases are just deteriorating water quality. Well, they're not helping. I would agree with you there. But let's be accurate about the fact that our watershed is a big contributor. So when we propose solutions, we need to propose them to the sources that exist. So what are we doing about this? Well, we have started having a weekly call with the Corps of Engineers and the Water Management District. And this enables us, the town of Fort Myers Beach, the city of Sanibel, Lee County, myself, our Marine Laboratory, and the Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. We report on the conditions and the scientific fundamentals about how our system is working, so that in Jacksonville and in West Palm Beach, they can make informed decisions about how to manage the water. Again, Jacksonville is the Corps of Engineers, and West Palm is the Water Management District. And we produce a weekly science report, and you can check that out on our website going back to 2011. And it gives all the statistics, and on a weekly basis, it's very interesting to see what's been happening. So what are the solutions? Because there are solutions, and again, we need to make sure they're targeted to the kinds of problems we're trying to solve. I want to talk to you about Tamiami Trail. That's the US 41 that crosses the Everglades. It was created in the 1920s and effectively is a dam that holds back water. So it gets too high on the north side and it starves water getting into Everglades National Park on the south side. We've got a tremendous excess of flow that's coming in from the Kissimmee, from Fish Eating Creek, from the different watersheds, and when Lake Okeechobee is constrained in how much water it can accommodate, those relief valves are the two estuaries. So we need storage in all of these systems. And then we need to address water quality at its source. So like Jennifer was mentioning, things like stormwater, the storm drains that take water off of our roads. It's very convenient for driving, but it's taking all the nutrients, everything that falls on the landscape, out into our waters. Septic tanks, leachate, there are nitrogens that are in particular, when you get a density of septic tanks, that are affecting water quality. Fertilizers, as she talked about, we've fought that for the past 7 years with the legislature, and then agricultural best management practices. So these are ways of addressing water quality at its source so that it doesn't get into the bays and the beaches and our lakes and rivers, and where we all have to clean it up. We'd like the people that are generating the pollution to clean it up at the source. So let's talk about Tamiami Trail. This is a priority project because, again, it's at the bottom of the system. This is down at the Everglades National Park boundary, and if you don't open the drain in the bathtub, the water will overflow the sides, right? So this is the drain in the bathtub. We need to, and this is the new bridge. If you haven't driven across, there's a 1-mile bridge that sits up a little bit in the sky to allow water to flow underneath it. Now, this is just the first mile of what we hope will maybe be 10 miles eventually. But there's another second phase that is 2.6 miles, and you might have heard the governor come to Fort Myers and commit $90 million to this next phase of the project, which is important because the federal government now has kind of has to save face and ante up their share, their $90 million, to make this next stage happen. And of course, this is going to enable us to move water south. So we've got to open up the bottom of the bathtub so we can start to move water out of Lake Okeechobee into the area south of the lake. Just for some contrast, so you can see this is the 1-mile section that is existing, and here's the next 2.6 miles. This is Shark River Slough, if you've ever gone on taking your bike or on the tram. So that gives you an idea about where that is. So how much water are we talking about? This is sort of like the national debt. When we start talking about trillions of dollars, my eyes glaze over. I have no way of, I can't fit that much money in my pocket, I know that much, but how much water are we talking about? So I'm going to use 2005 as one of the examples because that was one of our worst years ever. If you'll remember, we went into the Greek alphabet with hurricanes. So we had lots of water that year. Just in the Caloosahatchee, coming out this estuary to our beaches, we had 3.7 million acre-feet of water. And the best analogy I've come up with is that a football field is 1 acre, about. If you put 1 foot of water on a football field, That's 1 acre-foot. So we're talking about 3.7 million football fields of water. That's how much water came out in 2007. So then I looked at the year-to-date because I wanted to know how are we tracking this year compared to that year where we had so many storms. So based on the same year-to-date, in 2005, on this date, we had 2.55 million acre-feet of water. Today, we have 2.03 million acre-feet of water. We're basically one big storm, tropical storm, hurricane, away from being in some real dangerous territory in terms of excess flows. So how much storage do we need and where do we need it? How do we solve this problem? How do we begin to crack this nut? Well, we need 1 million acre-feet of storage north of Lake Okeechobee, in the Kissimmee Valley. We need 1 to 1.5 million acre-feet south of the lake. And in our own watershed, we need about 450,000 acre-feet. Well, the good news is there are some opportunities for us to look at short-term solutions. And these are things that we're telling the Senator Negron with the Senate Select Committee. He's holding hearings to try to figure out what could we do this year, before the end of the year, if we had the political will. And so these are some of the solutions we have been repeating to him. And I've got some of them listed for you out on a flyer. But the good news is that in the Kissimmee Valley, where the majority of the water is coming in, we have currently about 80,000 acre-feet of unused capacity. A couple years ago, we bought additional land through the Water Management District in this upper chain of lakes here. This is Lake Okeechobee. This is the Kissimmee Valley, and this series of lakes all feed in. We bought this extra land to provide that buffering capacity so we could store a little bit more water. And right now we have, as of today, about 80,000 acre-feet that they're not using. So we're imploring them to initiate operational protocols to start using that. We're not, not just pretty to look at. So that's one of the things. We've also asked them to declare a state of emergency. The governor can declare a state of emergency based on our economic conditions here on the West Coast and the East Coast. What would that consist of? Well, I'm sorry the color didn't show up, but this has color to show where all the floodwaters are. And you'll notice there's this big blank area right just south of the lake. That is the Everglades agricultural area, about 700,000 acres. That some of it is fallow, some of it has active croplands. But by putting water there now, we could gain about 1 million acre-feet of storage right away. We'd flood some active fields, yes. But let's think about that. That's maybe not all bad news. First of all, because the water that we would put there has a lot of sediment in it. It's a lot of that suspended material. And guess what? The Everglades agricultural area has been losing soil. So we could replace some of the soil. That high nutrient water, we could deposit some of those nutrients in that soil, but they come back to plant again. They've got a little foot up. They don't need as much fertilizer. And so this is an important opportunity. It would be short term. It would be for this emergency, but there's no reason to protect a private crop while you allow the public crop of seagrass and oysters and clams and shrimp to be destroyed. That's a close-up of the Everglades agricultural area. I wanted to get this. This is our watershed. So we talked about 1 million acre-feet north, 1 million acre-feet south. But right in our watershed, we have a whole series of projects that could be operational by next rainy season. The Water Management District has been studying them. We think we have a very good idea about what they could do. And so we'd like to see all of these projects that we've listed would still only get us about halfway to our goal. But that's halfway that we're not in now. And keep in mind that we are really in an extreme condition. This is not even an average condition. So every little bit starts to help. The C-43 reservoir is one of those you might have heard about. This is the one that would be in Hendry County, 170,000 acre-feet. Again, that's one piece of the puzzle. This is one that is currently waiting approval and funding through a federal bill called a Water Resource Development Act that has to be approved by Congress. That may take a while. One of the things we're asking the governor is say, what about that BP oil spill money? This would benefit the coast, and so we wouldn't have to go through Congress. We wouldn't have to get approvals if you use BP oil spill money. And there's some of that pot of money is under his control. So that's an option. Lake Hicpochee, that's just a picture. You can see the old lake outline. It's still all state-owned. Restoring half north and half south would give us some additional capacity and water quality treatment. You'll hear about a project called the Central Everglades Planning Process. This is a subset of CERP, the Central Everglades Restoration Plan. We love acronyms. And basically what it would do is it would create the infrastructure that allows us to flow water south. This first phase, only a very small portion of the flow would be directed there, but the important part to remember is it would create the highway. If you need a highway to drive from point A to point B, you got to have a highway to get from water from one point to the other. That's what this would do. So keep tuned to that. There also is a petition drive that's going on, the Florida Water and Land Legacy. If you have not signed a petition, this is one that would allow us to protect funding, establish funding for a project that has funded all of our parks and water projects for the state of Florida. So I'll be glad to talk to you about that. Why is all this important? Well, it's an economic driver, as we mentioned. You know, when you look at the VCB reports, 90% of people are here using our beaches and swimming. So water is very important, the reason that they come. Tarpon fishing and our artificial reefs, things that support fishing, are in the millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to our economy. And Lee County has the second largest saltwater fishing license income in the state after Monroe County. And you've probably seen this, Sanibel-Captiva and Fort Myers Beach have done exit surveys of visitors in their hotels, and 90% of their guests are asking about making inquiries about the condition of the water. 60% are saying that they have had cancellations or guests leave early. 63% have had comments about not returning and telling their friends not to come. And we are looking at losses, financial losses, to the communities here on the coast. So the message, here are our solutions. Stop the harm by buying the land, building the bridge, moving water south, and funding it now. There are flyers out front that give you specific targets, who to write to, and their addresses, and a few things about what to say. And then we've got our website that you can look at as well as a newsletter that we did for September issue. Is all about water.